I figured to myself that I presume I didn't live till I was 64 years old. Over the years, David, what did he do to prevent me from achieving? What did I miss out on because of this? The internal dialogue that was occurring felt like a wake-up call and a reprimand. Bruce remained silent, fixated on my every move. And that inspired me. His gaze, rather than his hands, provided me with support. As I delicately yanked down on the straps with my fingers. Oh, so pleasant. You weren't visible. All I was doing was giving a small narrative about our experience. To give you a better idea of how everything came to pass, I'll start afresh. That was when I was 64 years old. My stepgrandson's unexpected arrival turned what should have been a harmless task, cleaning up, into something much worse. I had been lonely and bereft of companionship since my husband David's death 12 years ago. In the wee hours of the morning, I mustered up the courage to do what I'd put off for years, clearing out the basement. I shied away from that disorganized space whenever the thought of it made my heart race. However, I mustered up the bravery to confront that neglected chamber brimming with antiquated containers, odorous waste, and cherished recollections. I was taken aback when I discovered an old photo album from my youth within the first box I opened. As I turned the pages, a single image caught my eye. It came from a bash at the beach. Laughing carelessly, I stood there with a margarita in one hand, a vibrant orange bikini on the other, and no worries whatsoever. Looking back at me was a joyful, carefree young Elizabeth. Something in me sparked as I looked at that shot. It was a combination of comfort and melancholy. All the long-forgotten memories, desires, and exhilaration that I had repressed suddenly resurfaced. At that very moment, I perceived a noise emanating from the entrance to the basement. My step-grandson Bruce was standing there when I turned around in a startled state. He hadn't crossed my path in 4 years. With that trademark grin, he appeared older and wiser. I last saw him when he was 23 years old. His age was about 27 at this point. In a gesture of surprise, he raised a coffee cup and spoke the word. "When did you arrive, Bruce?" I was taken aback, but my joy at seeing him shone through as I asked. He responded as he down the steps. "I decided to come inside after seeing your automobile outside. You appear to be in need of assistance." "Yes, I'm going to claim it." He strode over ahead of me, his unusually determined expression belying his youth. I was holding an album when his gaze fell upon it. He inquired, "What's this?" Just as I was about to take the picture from him, my body went into a stasis. He couldn't tear his gaze away from the seaside photo of young Elizabeth. He then turned to face me after staring at it for what seemed like an age. "Is that it? Might this be you?" My voice quivered as I chuckled nervously. In my younger, more carefree years, Bruce turned his attention back to me as he looked at the photo. Something between awe and astonishment was there in his eyes. It evoked a strange mix of unease and warmth. "Holy cow. Impressive," he smiled. "But it's strange to think of you in this way. Come on over to my channel for more if you're loving these tiny confessions. If you don't want to miss a thing, subscribe and enable notifications since this tale is just going to get better from here." Something I couldn't quite put my finger on flickered within of me. Things that David had never managed to reawaken within me. Emotions that I had stifled for a long time. They came to the surface for a brief second. However, this was incorrect. Such a thing is impossible. So much for the reminiscence. I snapped out of the album as soon as it began to play. We need to begin removing these outdated boxes from this location. However, I was completely unprepared for the path that the photo, Bruce's facial expressions, and the impending storm within me would lead me. As I reached to close the album, Bruce delicately restrained me. "This is something that needs our attention," he added, half seriously and half in jest. "Seeing you in such a fresh, young, and unique light is mind-boggling. Permit me to show you a bit more." I paused for a second. There were some innocent photos in that album. There were more daring pictures, ones that caught the wilder side of my adolescence, beyond those carefree beach pics. The awe and wonder I felt as I looked into Bruce's eyes made it impossible for me to refuse. "Okay," I muttered under my breath. "On the other hand, you might find too many of these photographs." Bruce nodded and let out a laugh. As he placed the record on his lap, he remarked, "I'm sure everything's great." He sat down next to me, and I could feel his breath brush across my flesh. As we turned the pages, Images of my college years spent in nightclubs replaced those of beach parties. In one shot, I was dancing clumsily in a red, form-fitting dress without a bodice. Bruce stared at that one for what seemed like an eternity. His face lit up with a mixture of amazement and wonder as he said, "Is this really you?" His gaze flitted between the photo and myself. "Yeah," I said with a hint of shyness. "Yeah, it was only because I was young. Relative to now, things were different." As soon as Bruce spoke up, "You're incredible," was the last word. "You were like a complete, party girl, but all this time I've only ever thought of you as my grandmother," he added after a brief pause. His remarks both embarrassed me and made me feel something. David, I reflected, had never showed me such adoration. His coldness, distance, and strictness had been there from the time I was a little girl. However, Bruce was unique. I could tell more from the expression on his face than from what he said. We continued to flip through the album, and the pictures became increasingly bold. In one, I was giggling with pals while clad in skimpy shorts and a bikini top. Still another depicted me, barefoot and dancing at a club. "Seeing these is an honor," Bruce added with a gentle smile. "You were stunningly beautiful even as a young girl." What a fortunate man David was. Although his comments brought me comfort, they evoked an additional emotion in me. Some strangeness. I became more aware of the attraction between us as I sensed Bruce's focus and curiosity. He reminded me of the ideal man I had fantasized about in my youth. I am self-assured, freely admired, and willing to reveal the hidden pieces of me to you. Bruce shut the album as we reached the final page, but he kept staring at me the whole time. "You are very remarkable," he whispered to Elizabeth. His statement shocked and affected me. So much time had passed since I'd last experienced that kind of treatment or words spoken to me. I could feel the tension between us intensify as our gazes met. There was a change occurring. A feeling of warmth arose within me, even though the cellar was chilly and dirty. I felt like a young person again being in Bruce's company. While this was happening, I had no clue what direction my emotions were leading me in. Even after turning to face me, Bruce's eyes had that profound awe as he closed the album. He spoke softly yet earnestly to Elizabeth. "Having seen all those images, I feel compelled to state this. Time has stood still for you. You are stunningly gorgeous and seem incredibly youthful." I was momentarily taken aback by the compliment. I was never accustomed to hearing such language, particularly from David, even when I was a kid. A small flush developed on my cheeks and my pulse rate increased somewhat. "Bruce, I'm grateful," I said. "However, I've aged, and that much is obvious." Nonetheless, I took a deep breath, gathered my courage, and then went on. "Perhaps I'm older now, but I certainly haven't lost sight of what I want. Forever have I held on to them." With his emerald eyes fixed on mine, Bruce beamed. "I can feel that," he declared. "You captivate with your beauty and charisma." I couldn't resist letting my gaze linger on his muscular physique for an instant. He looked like a Hollywood A-lister with his towering height, broad shoulders, and slightly tousled blonde hair. His green eyes, with their mix of assurance and kindness, were the first thing that caught my attention. I remarked that it's intriguing to hear somebody like you say anything like that. With a subtle smile, I chimed in. "Nobody compared to David was you." His demeanor was consistently somber and emotionally aloof. Nothing he did ever genuinely surprised or excited me. A decent dude overall, however. Bruce cocked his head, paying close attention. "I take it you didn't want that type of man, though." "Is that so?" he inquired. I wanted to avert my gaze, but I couldn't. "Honestly," I answered, "yeah. As much as I would have liked him to be, David was never really into it. While I won't accuse him of being a horrible man, I could never shake the feeling that something was lacking." Bruce waited a second before smiling at me, his expression a mix of confidence and kindness. "Maybe you should be aware of that," he remarked. "Perhaps now is the moment to discover what satisfies that need." His words ignited a fire within me. An enthusiasm I hadn't felt in years was sparked by the way this young man was expressing interest in me, comprehending me, and speaking with such assurance. It was at that same second that it hit me. Bruce wasn't like David at all. Additionally, he was strikingly similar to the ideal man I fantasized about when I was younger. Unfortunately, I had no idea what path these emotions would lead me to follow. Standing up and putting his hands in his pockets, Bruce waited a moment. I was once again the object of his emerald gaze. According to his calm and collected speech, he would return immediately after putting the bike in the garage. Still, Elizabeth, you shouldn't remain down there. Shall we meet in the living room? I was taken aback by the extraordinary impact of his self-assured tone and manner of leadership. In agreement, I gave a little nod. I told Bruce it was fine. I couldn't help but notice how even Bruce's passion for his motorcycle was impacting me, as I watched him briskly make his way upstairs. While he was working on it or riding it, I tried to picture how he may appear. Full of life, full of fire, and dead set on achieving his goals. The type of man I fantasized about as a child. To myself, I mumbled something about how much he resembles the ideal guy I had always dreamed. Despite the fact that he is my step-grandson, he is currently significantly impacting my life. I retreated to the living area and patiently waited. Bruce came back with a bottle of wine in no time at all. It was instantly recognizable as soon as my gaze touched the label. This rose was just wonderful. Again, I felt a fire burn within of me, but I couldn't fathom how or why he knew. I found the best place to get this, he remarked, his smile hinting at a smile. May it be to your liking. Are you a fan? I exclaimed, taken aback. Bruce, I absolutely adore this wine. What gave it to you? His expression betrayed his lack of interest in providing an explanation as he shrugged. When I was a kid, I had a keen eye for detail. I thought I recalled correctly. I took a brief break. It touched me greatly that this young man had such vivid memories of me. This wine is truly exceptional and shows such consideration, I whispered to Bruce. You have my gratitude. He emptied the contents of the bottle into 2 glasses, one of which he presented to me. He then suggested that they spend the evening reminiscing. With a lifted glass, I proposed a toast. My gaze remained fixed on Bruce as I savored the first sip, the distinctive flavor of the rose twirling on my tongue. I was captivated by him as our talk progressed, and not only because of his appearance. His thoughts and demeanor were captivating as well. When our glasses were almost empty, Bruce's gaze returned to me. His eyes were inviting, and I felt an irresistible draw in that direction. I could sense a change happening inside me, a blend of anxiety and anticipation, but I couldn't put my finger on it. Bruce halted abruptly. After putting his drink on the table, he returned his gaze to mine. At this moment, his stare was more intense and intent. He spoke of Elizabeth. He couldn't hide his emotions, but his voice was low and full of them. As I turned to face him, I felt my heart rate increase. I could feel my heart racing. Indeed, Bruce? I managed a barely discernible murmur, as if my voice were incapable of managing any more. Bruce suddenly extended his hand to take mine. I felt a surge of emotions as his warm fingertips ran delicately over my thin, fragile hand. My apologies if this is offensive, but... He started. I find it impossible to resist gazing at you. You're more than just stunningly gorgeous. You're more amazing than I could have ever imagined. His words reverberated within me, causing my face to turn red. Dear Bruce, you... I got halfway through, but he leaned in after a brief hesitation. I thought my heart was going to cease beating at that very second. I should have said no as I watched him approach, but the strong attraction I felt for him was too great. Everything appeared to come to a standstill as his lips gently brushed mine. That embrace. It was subtle yet profound. All of a sudden, I felt the long-repressed urges resurface. I gave in completely as his powerful hands came up to my waist. The tension between us remained in the air as Bruce moved his lips away from mine. Even now my heart was racing like a crazy person. Attempting to put into words the indescribable sensations I was experiencing, I fixed my gaze on him. At that very second, I gave in to an overwhelming urge and kissed him once more. It was I, this time, who took the initiative. My senses were reawakened as my lips met his for the second time. After an initial expression of surprise, Bruce wasted little time getting back to the question. Our kiss intensified, became passionate. He reached out and gently but firmly placed his hand on my waist, drawing me closer with his powerful fingers. His warmth spread across my entire being. There was hardly any room for us when we lay down on the couch side by side. Everything about him, his presence, his breath, filled the moment to the brim. As my head leaned against Bruce's chest, a sense of unease started to creep up my spine. Even though I wasn't afraid or hesitant, my heart was still pounding. It was an intense longing to release all grip. As I felt his calm yet inquisitive stare on me, I gently sat up. Without saying a word, his keen and concentrated gaze appeared to comprehend what was going on inside of me. My heart was racing as I stood up, but I eventually gave in to a strong, audacious impulse. My fingers slid to the delicate straps of my garment, which had begun to bind me like shackles. Bruce merely observed me without offering any commentary, and for some reason that inspired me. His gaze, rather than his hands, was offering me support. The dress dangled from my shoulders and dropped softly to the floor as my fingers slipped the straps down. The cloth encircled my unshod feet like a gentle pool. I felt a relief wash over me at that same second. There was more to it than meets the eye. It was symbolic, like letting go of years of self-control. I couldn't help but notice Bruce's face of wonder and respect as I returned my attention to him. Nothing was required of him verbally. He got it. This was me finally recognizing who I am and pushing over my limitations. Bruce rose from his seat and extended a hand to me as he gently stood up. His usual gentle yet firm touch was there. However, I was embracing not only him, but my entire being at that moment. I remained motionless on the couch for a whole 15 minutes. I barely clung to consciousness, but I pulled through. Perhaps my unusual resilience was a product of all those years of yearning. I had always been captivated by Bruce's strong athletic build. My attraction, though, had reached a whole new level of intensity. It felt as if the world had suddenly disappeared, leaving me gasping for air. His mere presence sent shivers down my spine and accelerated my heart rate. My body was physically drained in the most thrilling way I'd ever experienced before. A limit did not exist. It felt freeing. While I was engrossed in these intense feelings, my thoughts drifted to an unusual reflection. I told myself that I hadn't lived till this moment. Over the years, David, what did he do to prevent me from achieving? After all this time, what was it that I was denying myself? A long overdue awakening and a subtle rebellion. This introspection felt like both. As he continued to collect himself, Bruce ran his fingers through his hair. It helped to see that he was experiencing the same emotions I was. In a low voice he added, "I'm going to take a shower," while slightly smiling and smoothing his disheveled hair. His gentle voice, twinkle in his eyes, and unwavering resolve were all palpable to me at that very moment. With that, the reality of the situation was even more apparent. As I watched Bruce leave, my thoughts remained fixed on the events of the previous moments and the mixed emotions I had at the late-in-life thrill of finding who I am. You must have been deeply moved by my narrative if you have continued reading this far. You won't want to miss a single word of what I have to say. If you like this story, please consider following it, enabling notifications, and commenting below. Please share your opinions in the comments section. I am eager to read them. I am incredibly grateful for your support.